Hi there. Okay, I've had a request to do something on firms' objectives. So this particularly centres around the idea of non-profit maximising theories of the firm. But before we get there, let's just think about the standard assumption that we make about firms. And what we assume is that firms want to maximise their profits. We assume an economic theory suggests that the way in which you maximise your profits is producing the output at which MC equals MR. Yeah, so if we take a firm, let's suppose that's its marginal revenue line, that's its output, that's money, and that's marginal cost. Then what neoclassical economic theory assumes is that a firm will want to operate at Q1. And the reason is that this shows the increase or change in revenue. This shows the increase in cost from each unit. What we can see is that each unit adds more to revenue than it does to cost. So all of those units are adding to profit, whereas all ones beyond there would be reducing profit because the extra cost here is more than the extra revenue and profit would start going down. So if a firm wants to maximise its profits, it'll produce where MC equals MR. So why would we assume that a firm wants to maximise its profits? I mean, I guess that sounds like a bit of a stupid question in some ways, but if you were asked, you'd say, well, there are two main reasons that a firm wants profit. One is for reinvestment. The point about profits is that, kind of unlike loans, unlike shares, it's kind of free money. You don't have to pay anybody for using it. Loans from the banks, obviously, you've got to pay interest on those loans and so on. And therefore, that allows you to increase scale. It allows you to innovate. It can link to dynamic efficiency and so on. So there are reasons that, from a practical operational front, firms will want profits. Secondly, the owners of this business are going to want something back. So for example, shareholders, they're going to expect profits. They want to receive dividends. And if you don't pay those dividends, they're likely to sell their shares in the long term, which leads to a reduction in your share price and makes you more vulnerable to take over. So therefore, neoclassical theory has assumed that firms want to make profit. It's a reward for risk. Starting a business is a risky endeavour. You want something back for it. And it seems reasonable in a neoclassical world, at least, that if profit's good, then more profit is even better. And so therefore, we would want to try and maximise it. Now, in reality, that's not necessarily sensible, and it's not necessarily possible. And that's what we need to think about. It might not be sensible because maximising your short-term profit may have issues in the long term. So short-termism, to maximise your short-term profit, for example, what you might do is to decrease research. And that saves you money. Or to decrease quality. For example, that saves you money. Or if demand's inelastic in the short term, you might increase your prices. But none of that makes a whole heap of sense, because it's going to, unless you face some sort of short-term emergency, because it's just going to make the business less successful in the long term. But there are also practical issues. So one is kind of philosophical issues that actually is not very sensible. A second issue is it may not really be very easy to maximise your profits, and there are two reasons that might be. There are two reasons that might be the case. If we're going to say difficulties with maximising your profit, then what we can say is that one, there are kind of information difficulties. We're assuming in neoclassical theory that you want to produce where MC equals MR. Fine. But not all organisations know what their marginal cost is. Or indeed what your marginal revenue is. It's actually in practice very, very difficult to calculate. And therefore it may not be as easy as you might think to simply maximise your profits. But in the real world, there is a particular issue with firms maximising their profits. And that's that firms are actually run by managers, but they're owned by somebody else. They're owned by shareholders. There is what's called the divorce between ownership on the one hand, so that's the people who own the business, that's the shareholders, and control, which people who run it, who are the managers. And let's suppose for the sake of argument that those people can't control those people. Let's suppose that the shareholders have difficulties in controlling the managers. Well, why would the managers want to make profits? They don't get it. They may pursue other objectives. So one thing we need to understand is this idea that it may not always be possible for shareholders to control managers. Why not? Kind of three main reasons. Why difficulties controlling managers. Three main reasons. One is that shareholders have no day-to-day control. So as a shareholder, your main access to the business is through the AGM, the annual general meeting, which by definition happens once a year. You're not making day-to-day decisions, and therefore it's very difficult to ensure that a firm is doing what you want it to. Secondly, you've got huge information issues. The information that you get from about the business, by definition, is provided by the business. Therefore, there are significant amounts of information asymmetry. It's highly unlikely they're telling you the whole truth. So therefore, it's very difficult for you to know exactly what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, it's very difficult to make the firm maximise profits. And thirdly, you've got what I sometimes call collective action problems. You have large numbers of small individual shareholders, large numbers, even the bigger organisations, they operate in different sectors across the whole world. They don't necessarily want the same thing. Therefore, getting them to coordinate, to make decisions together can be quite difficult. Although there has been some progress made on that front, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes.